truth,
love,
and the good.
here we go.
Although the sight of water made her feel 10 times thirstier than before, she didn't rush forward and drink. She stood as still as if she had been turned into stone, with her mouth wide open. And she had a very good reason. Just on this side of the stream lay the lion. It lay with its head raised and its 2 forepaws out in front of it, like the lions in Trafalgar Square. She knew at once that it had seen her, for its eyes looked straight into hers for a moment and then turned away, as if it knew her quite well and didn't think much of her.
If I run away, it'll be after me in a moment, thought Jill. And if I go on, I shall run straight into its mouth. Anyway, she couldn't have moved if she had tried, and she couldn't take her eyes off it. How long this lasted, she could not be sure. It seemed like hours, and the thirst became so bad that she almost felt she would not mind being eaten by the lion, if only she could be sure of getting a mouthful of water first.
If you're thirsty, you may drink. They were the first words she had heard since Scrub had spoken to her on the edge of the cliff. For a second she stared here and there, wondering who had spoken. Then the voice said again, "If you are thirsty, come and drink." And of course she remembered what Scrub had said about animals talking in that other world, and realized that it was the lion speaking. Anyway, she had seen its lips move this time, and the voice was not like a man's. It was deeper, wilder, and stronger, a sort of heavy, golden voice. It did not make her any less frightened than she had been before, but it made her frightened in a rather different way. "Are you not thirsty?" said the lion.
I'm dying of thirst, said Jill.
"Then drink," said the lion.
May I? Could I? Would you mind going away while I do? Said Jill.
The lion answered this only by a look and a very low growl. And as Jill gazed at its motionless bulk, she realized that she might as well have asked the whole mountain to move aside for her convenience. The delicious rippling noise of the stream was driving her nearly frantic.
Will you promise not to do anything to me if I do come? Says Jill.
"I make no promise," said the lion.
Do you eat girls? She said.
"I have swallowed up girls and boys, women and men, kings and emperors, cities and realms," said the lion. It didn't say this as if it were boasting, nor as if it were sorry, nor as if it were angry. It just said it.
I daren't come and drink, said Jill.
"Then you will die of thirst."
Oh dear, said Jill, coming another step nearer. I suppose I must go and look for another stream then.
"There is no other stream," said the lion. C.S. Lewis, The Silver Chair.
Right. We did not rehearse that at all. Great passage. You sent this to me in a WhatsApp, and I was like,
Yeah.
I'm a huge fan of C.S. Lewis. But by the way, in case this is the first time you're seeing or listening to the podcast, I'm David Tian, Ph.D. For over the past almost 12 years, I've been helping hundreds of thousands of people in over 87 countries attain success and happiness in life and love. And this is my good friend, Henry Chong.
Yes.
And I'll allow him to introduce himself.
So, I'm Henry Chong. I'm the CEO of the Fusang Group, sometime compadre on this podcast. And my day job is in finance, but my evening job, I suppose, is looking at things like life, love, and the universe, and talking with David Tian.
Yes, and we are in one of the meeting rooms of Fusang
Yes.
in Singapore. We have a nice backdrop, if you're watching this on video, of
Lee River.
The Lee River
Yes.
in Guilin, I think is the area. It looks like on the shore of the bend. Beautiful. Anyway, I'm not going to get lost. That's just gorgeous. We were reading C.S. Lewis, and I'm a huge fan of C.S. Lewis. In fact, so I'm such a huge fan, I could go on for hours about C.S. Lewis. But before we do that, or instead of doing that, why did you send this passage to me?
So this passage, I came across it a long time ago, and it is something that I think it's so profound because, like all good writing, it means different things to different people at different times in their lives. And I came across this, I just thought of it recently because I was thinking about something that another Stoic had written where he said that you can never step in the same river twice. And I think a lot of us in life think that we can, right? I'll do it tomorrow is the common refrain. And the truth is it's different, right? You can't go back to the way things were ever. No matter what, the river of time will have moved on and things will have changed. And I thought of this passage specifically because I've been reading another book we were talking about called The War of Art by this great author called Stephen Pressfield. Another book I'd heard about a lot and never actually got around to reading until recently. And I found it very profound. And he talks about this concept of the resistance. And he basically says that anytime you want to do anything significant in your life, anytime you want to make a change, this force called the resistance shows up. And it is directly proportional to the size of the change you want to make or the size of whatever you want to achieve. And the resistance can be very subtle, right? It's even things like saying, you know, it's the new year, it's January, I'm going to go to the gym, and oh, my grandmother dies, so I can't. And it shows up in all kinds of ways. And I find it fascinating because he talks about how, I mean, Stephen Pressfield's a writer, and he's talking specifically about writer's block and how, you know, so many writers say they have books within them and they just never, they say, well, I just can't seem to sit down and write.
Yeah,
and he says,
writing. I think everyone's experienced that.
Exactly. It's like, look, you got to sit down, you got to do it, and you got to recognize that this force of the resistance will show up. And once you realize that and you expect it, then when it inevitably comes, as it must, right? It's almost like Newtonian physics. Like it's an equal and opposite force that must show up. And when you recognize that it will come and you're prepared for it, when it does come, you go, this is the resistance, right? It's not, I expect this and I know how to deal with it.
Yeah.
And the reason why this passage made me think about that is because, you know, so often, so many of us, myself included, you know, we need to go to the gym. And it's almost like we're standing at the bank of the river looking in and saying, you know what, like, I'm really thirsty. I'm really thirsty. I really want to go to the gym. But like, oh, I don't know, there's a lion in the way, right? And to me, the lion is almost like the resistance. It's like saying, well, you know, maybe if I just wait till tomorrow, the lion will go away. Or maybe I'll just find a different stream. And of course, the truth of life is that there is no other stream. The lion will never go away. The resistance has shown up for you as it has shown up for everyone in history. I am sure that emperors and kings of the past faced the exact same struggles and the exact same resistance. Marcus Aurelius, famously in his meditations, struggled to wake up in the morning, right? He's like, my bed is warm, I don't want to get up in the morning. These things don't change. And I think that once you realize that that resistance will be there, that it will never go away, and that you have no choice but to jump into the river because there is no other stream, then I think that shift is quite interesting. Right? No point waiting till tomorrow to go to the gym. It won't get any easier. No point sitting around hoping that, I don't know, miraculously I'll get in shape without going to the gym. You say, look, the fact that I want to go, I know that the resistance will show up. I have no choice but to stare down the lion, to jump in the stream, and to just immerse myself in the present, in the river of time.
Yeah, I was turned on to Pressfield years ago by Seth Godin's book, Linchpin. Have you heard of that one?
Yes. Yeah.
So Linchpin, I was just a big fan of Godin back then, and still am, and I read everything. And Linchpin was his newest book at the time, and Linchpin blew me away. I guess I could say it changed my life. It was so many years ago now that, and he kept referencing Pressfield. Yeah. And Godin talked about the lizard brain, and how the lizard brain will always try to give you this resistance, and you have to say no to the lizard brain. Yeah. The lizard brain is really great because thinking about it in terms of an animalist or like a more primitive part of our brains makes sense from an evolutionary perspective. So in evolution, one of the reasons why scientists posit, scientists posit that one of the reasons why men live shorter lives on average is because they were rewarded for taking more risks. Yeah. But if they took too many risks, they would just die all the time. So we are the product of a risk and risk and being conservative, or what is it? Being able to play with risk in an intelligent way, or so risk and caution. Yeah. And once you've risked enough, you kind of just want to stay alive and hope that your kids stay alive, and then your genes will be really happy about this. Yeah. So we have inherited a relatively risk-averse life, and playing it safe was a good strategy for survival. Like if you don't rock the boat, and you don't offend anyone, if you don't stick out too much, then you're generally going to survive. Like you'll be better off in terms of, the tribe and so on, and you can benefit from societal protections. Of course, you're not going to be rewarded with disproportionate rewards if you are always risk averse. So we've inherited risk aversion as part of our genes. So it makes sense if you're about to make a huge change in your life. So generally there isn't a resistance. I don't think there's a resistance in children. Like when you're young enough, you'll do everything. Like you'll try to walk, even though that's incredibly difficult for a child to do when he's first learning it. But you'll fall down, you'll get up. There's no part of you that's like the resistance to walking. Like you really want to walk. Yeah. And there's all these other things you really want to eat. There's all these things where there's very little resistance. And then as you get older and older, you want to play it safe more and more. Yeah. And if you make any big changes, it's your primitive brain saying, oh shit, you're getting into some trouble here, potential risk, because you're sticking your neck out, you're making any major changes. And evolutionarily, this has been a risky strategy. But you'll never get any big wins unless you do that. And the word that Godin kept using was ship. So in case you're like, actually workout's really good. I want to come back to that. But like what it was for me was writing was a big one. And finishing any projects and putting it through. So I'm really good up to like the 90%. So 90% done, I'm fully in it. And then that last 10%, I feel like it's pretty much done. I'll go get a beer, and then that 10% takes as long as it took you to get to 90%. And I discovered I need to outsource this just to give me some extra accountability. So at that point, I'll push it off to a bunch of people and then they'll usually run with it. But I just knew that about myself, that right at that edge, I get that perfectionism thing. I don't want to actually sign my name off on it, because then if it's bad, then that means a lot. It says about something about me. So I have to get over all of that. And I'm reading about this in Godin. So writing a term paper is a big part of that resistance of just get it done, get it out there. Yeah. And most students, so I was a university professor for years, for about 3 years as a professor, and then as a grad student instructor, marking papers for like 4 years. And I know from both the student side and as the marker side that you tell students the first day of class when the paper's due. You never get the paper though, or very few people even hand in drafts unless it's required. Most people don't hand in drafts. Like 90% or more of the students do not hand in drafts to be graded or like to be given feedback on until they basically start working on it like the week of, or depending on how long it is, might be maybe the night of, right? And I was like that too. We just put it off forever until you can't put it off any longer. So I started to get more handle on the resistance as I got through grad school, and I realized I needed to get the paper to the marker like halfway through the term, even if it was just the thesis statement. Like, what do you think about this? And doing that was a pathway to getting A's and A+ all the way through. And when I read about this, so in business, there's a lot of shipping that has to happen. And the faster you ship, the more you turn around projects, the more you just churn stuff out instead of holding back and waiting, the more success you will get in life. Like just putting it out there. Reid Hoffman has a great quote. If you're not embarrassed by the first version of your product, you shipped too late. Yeah. It was like you launched too late or something. And I discovered that that's true in everything. So there were a lot of guys who watched me and found me through dating and maybe even through the old pickup stuff. Approach anxiety is like a perfect example of that, right? So you're supposed to, you as an adult, mature person, you should be able to talk to or walk up to a stranger and just start a conversation, or at least, do your part and say hi and start that, initiate the conversation. But a lot of guys have approach anxiety. And that's an example of the resistance, because you're really putting yourself out there. If it turns out she's married to a gangster boss who is really possessive, then he can come out and just like kill you. And that was, that's something that's from like 10,000 years ago or 20,000 years ago. That might have been something, or 50,000 years ago. That might have been the case. There might have been that risk. But now in modern times, there's very little chance of that actually happening. But our brains are inherited or evolved from that period. Yeah. So we're still reacting to that. The lizard brain is still reacting to the resistance. Yeah. What are ways that you've discovered to get through this resistance so you don't end up feeling
So that's the thing, right? There's nothing wrong with being risk averse, right? I mean, you talk about people like Nicholas Nassim Taleb, and he says that you don't want to run the edge too fine. The problem with walking on the knife's edge is you might fall off, right? And there are good reasons to have a strategy that is resilience, right? Anti-fragile and all the other things he talks about, especially in an uncertain, chaotic world. The issue, I think, is that a lot of, I work in finance. Everything is about pricing risk appropriately. The problem is that in our lives, we don't price risk appropriately, right? The reason why we don't want to go to the gym is because once upon a time, conservation of energy was the prime directive as an organism. Don't think too hard, don't move too quick because you burn more calories. In today's world, that's not a real risk anymore. If anything, the risk is the complete opposite, that I'm not burning enough energy. And so in that sense, we are completely pricing risk the wrong way. So I don't think it's so much about, you just need to learn to take more risks or be more risk averse. It's just that you need to learn to price risk properly.
Right. Well, the resistance comes in when it's an irrational risk aversion.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
So if you understand the evolutionary background of why you would have this feeling, even though it's irrational, then you can say, this is an irrational feeling and I need to take action, steps to get through
it. I mean, I think that's exactly right. And, talking about writers, for example, they think you're going to die, right? That's why they can't write, right? To them, it's almost like an existential threat, or so the lizard brain believes. And I think the best way to get over that is by, obviously, setting clear goals. Everyone talks about this. Very few people do it. And then having feedback mechanisms.
Right.
And most importantly, accountability, right? That's what I found in my own life.
Accountability.
That we do.
Oh, that's great.
So, for example, talking about writers, journalists know how to write to deadline because they had no choice. If you were writing at a newspaper, you had no choice. You have a deadline at, 3 a.m. and you produce one way or another.
Okay, it's such a great... Okay, so I used to write for the newspaper. There's this paper in Singapore, a national paper called The New Paper, and I had to send in a column every week on the dot. There's a deadline. There was like 2 or 3 hours leeway, but it's going to print, and if I don't get my thing in, I'd miss the deadline. I never missed the deadline for over a year. And I was crazy because sometimes I would literally be writing on the deadline while friends are waiting downstairs in the car, and I'm just like, I gotta get this thing out, and it sucked. There was this literary agent. This is one of I'm going to tell you something that I've not told many people. I think I've told you before, but there was a literary agent who was very high up in the literary agency world. He was a literary agent for Robert Greene. And he was at that time just finished the 50th Law with 50 Cent. So he's a big-time literary agent. And he emailed me out of the blue. We had a bunch of conversations. He wanted me to write a book. And he said to me, because I see that you're a journalist, I know you can get it done on this time. And the problem was I had then just begged off of the newspaper thing because the university was saying... It's like giving me pressure on writing these dating columns in the national paper, and so I acquiesced. One of the small regrets I had, and gave that newspaper column up. And as soon as that stopped, I had no accountability on writing again, and I kept thinking, I've got this great idea, and it just kept ballooning into bigger and bigger ideas, and I couldn't sit down and get it all out. And one of the things is perfectionism. So all achievers suffer from perfectionism. Perfectionism is shame-based. So part of the main reason why achievers are perfectionists is because once they ship the thing, once they put a finality to the project, they can then be judged. And if the project isn't an A or doesn't match what their identity is psychologically or how they think of themselves, then that is actually shameful to them. It makes them lose face to themselves, and even if it's completely irrational, which many times it is. And that resistance, every time you skip a deadline, for every minute or every day that you miss the deadline or you let yourself down, it just builds and builds and builds. And eventually it becomes an albatross over you and you just can't get anything done. And eventually after dilly-dallying for like a year, the literary agent was like, look, man, I need something now. And so I sent it to him. But even then he was like, okay, I got all these other projects, so it's going to be way down here on the priority list. And it's just one of those things I lost because I let the resistance win. So that's a little
exactly. I mean, look, that's mistakes. Why personal trainers are great, right? Even if some of the fittest people in the world have trainers purely because you have an external force keeping you accountable. Right. You need a way of measuring. Ideally, you make these things public. Is a great way of being accountable. I write a letter every Sunday, and by magic somehow it gets done, right? Because once you've publicly committed to it. I remember when I decided to start doing it, I just sort of announced that I was doing it, and by magic, the first one got done somehow. So I would say, again, find clear goals, find someone to give you feedback, whether it's a coach or a third party. It's very hard to do it internally for yourself. And then you need an accountability mechanism. It doesn't have to be, reward punishment. It's just literally someone measuring and saying, hey, what's happening with this? What's happening with this? Keeping you on track.
Yeah.
And recognizing that, again, resistance will show up, that is just part of being human.
Yeah.
And finding ways to just get it done. But to be honest, I would still say at the end of the day, like Jocko says, there is no magic to it. You still need to begin at some point. And you just got to jump into that river and go.
That I can help. So, okay. Accountability has been huge for me. Unfortunately, many of the things that I want to transform myself around, I'm often the first in the peer group to do that. Sometimes I can find somebody who will work out with me, but most of the time I'm pushing myself more than in that area than the others. Because otherwise I would be at their level in that other thing, because they'd be pulling me forward. So here's one of the things I discovered with fitness. I used to work out 3 times a week, and I could do that, and there'd be pretty intense workouts because I had a trainer 3 times a week. So he was there every session. Then I moved away from China, where it was cheap to get training, and I moved at that time to Singapore, where at that time I wasn't making as much, so it was more expensive to get training. So I stopped doing that. And then, Friday rolls around, you're tired, and your friends are calling you out, and you got to meet this chick or whatever, so you just like, I'll do it some other time. And then you just miss the workout. And then sometimes you're like, you're trying to remember, is today a workout day? And then just that little, so what happened was I did P90X. So I had accountability, but a lot of the time we weren't working out together at all. We were in completely different countries, different time zones, in fact. And so there was a little bit of accountability. We checked in online once a week to make sure we were on track. Okay. But what really helped was it's every day. Yeah. Well, 6 days. 6 days a week, there's some workout you're supposed to be doing. Yeah. Sometimes you're sick or you get too busy, and then I just picked up where I left off. And the regularity of it was what made it into a habit of working out. So I didn't have to think about it. Just every day at this particular time, I'm supposed to be at the gym, and I just get used to it. So I don't have to think about it. And then it's even better with the workout program, because you just open, like a training program, you open the computer and you just press play on the whatever. They tell you, so you don't have to think. And once you get into that habit, the rhythm. So one of the things I've discovered for, anything like writing, creating video content, creating podcasts, is if you get a regularity to it. And the thing is, the reason why there's resistance is if you think it's a big deal. Yeah. So I've tricked myself into thinking it's not a big deal. So one of the things I did was, for writing, is I write emails. Yeah. So you can write an email to yourself, because you notice, like, when you're really incensed, like somebody really pisses you off, or you're really passionate about something, you can sit there forever and just write. Like people on Reddit or those old forums, they'll write long essays and not even realize it because they're just so pissed, right? Yeah. And we can do that. And when we see the inbox and the viewer or whatever, like the edit, the preview thing, right? We're used to writing in that. Yeah. And we can write long. So I know people, I think Tim Ferriss, might have picked this up from Tim Ferriss, who used to write long essays in his Gmail to himself. And then you also have it automatically saved and you can search it. So I don't do that, but similar to that, if you trick your lizard brain into thinking you're not doing anything spectacular, it's nothing special, you're just going to do it. And you have very low expectations. So instead of doing P90X, there's another program called P90, I think. And it's like, or actually P10, there are 10-minute workouts. You can just start with 10 minutes. You trick your brain into doing it. And then if you go to the gym to do it, or if you go down to your condo gym or whatever, you're not going to just work out for 10 minutes. Not like after a while. You already got all dressed up and like into your workout gear, and you're going to shower after. So you might as well do another 10 minutes. Next thing you know, it's 20 minutes, 30 minutes. But you get into this regularity of it, and you trick your brain into just starting it. Yeah. And when it came down to approaching women, I used to do this to teach my students, and I probably did this myself many years ago, like 10 plus years ago is how I figured it out, was you just start moving your legs. Like, she's there, you're frozen, you're scared, anxiety. Look away and just start moving your feet towards her. And then like that momentum, before you know it, you're there. And then now she's seeing you walk towards her. So now she's looking at you. And now you got to open your mouth. This is ridiculous, right? And you're just tricking your lizard brain into thinking, well, you're distracting your lizard brain in that case. But you're also tricking it into thinking it's not a big deal. Because thinking it's a big deal is what creates that resistance and the alarm. Yeah. So, as something you were talking about earlier, I think is very important, where you said, like, 100% is easier than 99%. Because if you've just decided to do something, you say, every single day I work out and it's just what I do, you just do it, right? 100%. If you say I do it 99% of the time,
then you have to, well, is today the 1%? Maybe it's like today workout
right.
day. I don't know, right? Maybe it's not. Maybe today's a repetition.
And then so when you work out 6 times a week, the day you have to remember is your rest day.
Exactly.
And then then you have to take effort not to work out, which is a great feeling. And then you're like, well, I want to work out. But then you reward yourself with some nice meal or something. And that's a great point. Like it's harder to do 99%. Oh, that's an
exactly. I mean, people say, well, I can't meditate for 5 minutes in the morning. It's like, well, you brush your teeth every morning, most people, right? I mean, again, once you've just decided it's a thing you do, you just do it.
Well, I tell guys, like,
optionality.
People say, oh, I can't meditate every day, so I'll just do it 3 times a week. I'm like, forget it. Yeah. It's not going to happen. Why don't you, instead of doing that time, cut it up into 7 different units and do that every day.
Yeah.
One other thing is your identity, the way you think of yourself. So you have to begin to think of yourself as somebody who does that activity that you're putting off. So if you want to work out more, you just think of yourself as somebody who works out all the time. You can even think of yourself as an athlete, like an amateur athlete or a warrior or something like that. It's just part of who you are. And if you want to write more, you should start talking about yourself as a writer. And that will help the resistance disappear because you're already thinking, this is what I do. This is just a natural part of what I do. Versus I am somebody who is now going to try doing this other thing.
Well, maybe one last thing, because I know this is stretching, that you're talking about, like when you make it a big deal, resistance shows up even more, is I was watching this thing by Bruce Lee a while ago when he talks about dynamic tension. And, exactly how when you punch, the whole, all cultures or martial art cultures will tell you can't be tense, because if you're tensing when you punch, some of that energy is going towards tensing the muscle, not towards the punch. And one thing I've realized in the gym, to use it as an example again, is when I'm trying to grit my way through a workout, it's hard. But, if I just let go and surrender to the process, then it just sort of happens, right? I mean, it's still objectively hard, but, the Stoics talked about how, when there's pain and suffering, right? As Tony Robbins talks about, they're 2 different things. And if you choose to suffer over an event, it's almost like getting hit by the same dart twice. Just like if you're in the process of a hard workout, there is objectively the fact that it is hard, and then there is me struggling against the fact that it's hard and saying this is hard. And I think we spend a lot of effort on that. On the sort of, it's almost like tensing your muscles when you're trying to punch.
Yeah.
And if you can just let go and, again, maybe to come back to it, jump into that stream and just flow in the stream and realize that there is no other stream, there is no other way, right? There's no point trying to decide, A, whether to get in the stream, and B, there's no point fighting against the current, right? That stream is going, whether you like it or not. You might as well be present in the stream. Things flow a lot better.
Yeah. So physical fitness, like I said, we need to try to end off, but physical fitness is such a great analogy and metaphor for life. One of the things I discovered along those lines is when the pain starts to happen, instead of wishing you weren't working out or hating it, you lean into it, like you go deeper. So one of the things I did squats and deadlifts today and kettlebell swings, all in the same workout. I love this day, but it's hard. It's a tough workout. And like even if I'm just, after a deadlift day, if I'm just standing normally, I feel it like after a little while, not too long, in the lower back, like, oh man, it's sore. But it's a good sign. But anyway, one of the things that happens is inevitably you'll reach that point where you're getting to failure. So ideally, every set or the later sets should be towards failure in the type of hypertrophy workouts I do. And you can think about the muscle. So the muscle is in pain. It's burning, especially if you're at like a high rep range, like 12 reps or 10, 12. And on the last 3, or whenever it's painful, you start to imagine that you're, sort of like a sci-fi movie. You're in that muscle now, and blood's rushing in, like whatever visualization you need to do. Like I remember Arnold Schwarzenegger talking about how he imagined his biceps were gigantic mountains, and that actually makes the pain feel good, and your brain reinterprets the feeling, and it's like So sometimes I try not to say that too loud, but when I finish that sound, like oh yeah.
Yes. Again, remember. The resistance is directly proportional to the size of the thing you're trying to do. So if you're looking at that stream and you see a big lion, that means that it's something important, and it's exactly where you need to go.
Yeah, right. So just going back to the story and just to end off, I guess we'll try to end off here. The passage ends with, I daren't come and drink, said Jill. Then you will die of thirst, said the lion. Oh dear, I suppose I must go and look for another stream then. He says there is no other stream. The penultimate line on this passage, I suppose I must go and look for another stream then, is the default response of everybody. So like the best response to, like I run the show, Man Up, right? Yeah. And in the Man Up show, it's just Q&A. Every question, there's a easy response. But most of the video or most of the, the response is me massaging the truth because I know, because over 10 years giving it answers, I can't just say it point blank because there's going to be resistance. And they're always, the first response is, if you just point blank tell them, like he tells me some X situation, and the point blank truth is that relationship will never work out. 99% chance it will never work out. It won't work out. And you need to go through the breakup recovery process and go through kind of therapeutic process. And the answer will be, but what if I did this? Can I get her back? Like there's always the but what if. So, but is there another stream? Is there another way? Is there another path to get to this goal? And so I guess we've all done that sort of thing. Like, is there no other way? Yeah. As you get older, hopefully, or more skilled or more experienced in life, you realize that even if there were another way, that's almost always the bad way to go. There's a subculture of hacks. I think we talked about this in another podcast of looking for cheat codes in life. And there are better ways of doing things for sure. But if they were that easy to discover, like everybody would have them in a way, right? And then when you get higher and higher up in achievement, like imagine an Olympic athlete. All the Olympic athletes know all of the other Olympic athletes' secrets, like their techniques. They train in the same facilities, right? Like, so at a certain point, it's not about do you have any tricks. It's about how good are you at these fundamental things, and your mindset, most importantly, and that there's the obstacle is the way. Is like that. That's what I think about when there's no other stream. Absolutely. You have to lean into the obstacle that you're trying to avoid because that's the only way through. Exactly. Look for the pain, and then lean into it. So what I'm doing a lot now in my other, like the video series and things like that, is clinical psychology. And in clinical psychology, all you're doing is discovering emotional pain in your life, present, that you currently feel, as a clue back to some earlier traumatic event at which you made a decision about how you are or how life is or how you are with life. And you have to go back to that point where you made that decision and make a new decision with a new perspective now that you're more mature, or that now that you've talked through it and you can see it more calmly and rationally. That's all that. So it all starts with finding the emotional pain and tracing it back where there's even more pain. Like the original point is going to be so much stronger. Experiencing it, feeling it, and then only then can you heal and grow from it and become stronger as a result. But most people in life go through life trying to avoid all the pain. Yeah. And what I've also discovered, I made the mistake of just recommending therapy to people right away without explaining why. And then I have these very obedient students, and they'll just go to therapy. Okay, David says I should go to therapy. I'll go to therapy. So they go to the therapist, and the therapist's always going to ask you why you're there. That's the presenting problem. And you're supposed to say something like, I'm really depressed because my mom died, or something, But they'll say, because this guy, David, told me I should. And the therapist's totally thrown off. He's never heard this before. So they're like, what does this mean? And they're like, oh, I don't know. I was just told this is the next thing I need to do. And then there's it doesn't work because in order for the therapist to actually do anything with this person, he needs to feel some pain. But he's going to therapy to not feel pain. So then he just quits. He's like, oh, whenever I see the therapist, it's just too painful and I just cry. So I quit. That's exactly what you're supposed to be doing in therapy. You're supposed to lean into the pain and cry and feel, So I guess now I'm trying to say that more and more. You got to find the thing that makes you cry, makes you sad, and lean into it and feel it even more, and then try to remember back to what that triggers for you, and then process that. So, C.S. Lewis.
Absolutely.
Man.
There is no other stream.
Yeah, there's no other stream. Okay, well, that's a great way to end. Thanks for following us on this conversation. We'd love to hear what you think. Join the private Facebook group. Click the link. There's a group for the DTPHD Podcast. You can interact with us there. And how do they get to know you better?
I guess you can find me on my website at henrychong.com, HENRYCHONG.com. And I write a newsletter every Sunday, come hell or high water. And you can find that at fusang.co/newsletter. So that's FUSANG.co/newsletter.
Yes, my wife reads that religiously. She even says she responds to it, and then you respond back. And you can reach me at davidtianphd.com, and then you can see all the podcasts at davidtianphd.com/DTPHD Podcast. All right, man. Brilliant. Another good conversation. See you at the next one. Hey, it's David again. Before you go, a couple last things. First, all the show notes and links to resources can be found at davidtianphd.com/DTPHD Podcast. Or you can just go to davidtianphd.com and find it through the top navigation menu. Second, if you'd like to interact with me or other like-minded fans of the podcast, then join our private DTPHD Podcast Facebook group. We've got an awesome community of intelligent, wise individuals from literally all around the world. You can send a join request to the group using the link you'll find in the show notes of every podcast at davidtianphd.com/DTPHD Podcast. Click the link, log into your Facebook, and then click to join. We approve join requests every day. So go to davidtianphd.com and click the link to join. See you inside our group.